Hello, puppies and kittens. Once again, I am with my friend David FItzgerald, who has written another book. But there's one other thing we got to jump to first. I just got the news an hour or two ago. This is the first bit I've been able to talk about it. I'm going to make another video about it after this, but I just heard that Daniel Dennett has died as of earlier today. And this man was of the four horsemen of atheism, whatever. He was the one that I resonated with the most, and he was a very pleasant individual. He was very helpful to me, and so Fitz,
Slanchika Sulika
to the influence of Daniel Dennett.
to Daniel Dennett.
All right, so I understand, Mr. FItzgerald,
Yes.
thou hast been playing God.
Indeed. It hit me the other day that for the last 2.5 years, I've been working on this book, which if you've read Jesus Mything in Action, you know I have a tendency to turn one book into 3 books, and that's exactly what happened this time again. So Playing God, An Evolutionary History of World Religion is coming out super soon this summer, I hope, as soon as I can possibly get it all formatted and proofed and all that good stuff.
I am looking forward to that. I took a course in the history of comparative world religions. I was the only one in the class to get an A.
Ha!
In that. Yeah, and the funny thing is like everybody else in the class, I don't know what they were thinking. I think a lot of them walked into that class thinking that the oldest book ever written, or the first book ever written, was Genesis.
Yep.
And that Moses was therefore the world's first author.
Yep.
And so everybody else was obviously Protestant Christian. And some of them were really, creationist types, young earth born, and they're just, so everything they learned in that class was prompted reactions like, what if the pagan stuff that you're talking about, what if that all came after? What if that came that was like corrupted in Genesis? And the teacher, professor, the professor was he was a Methodist, and he had he was some kind of a minister or whatever, but I mean that wasn't his primary thing. He's a scholar. He's a Bible scholar, and so his thing was like, but that's not possible.
I like there was a medieval church father who said, well, it's obvious that Satan must have seen the prophecies written in the Old Testament and created Christianity among the pagans beforehand.
Is this Justin Martyr?
I want to say Firmicus Maternus, but it could have been either of those guys. Yeah,
because I think it was Martyr that says, well, what's the difference between what we're saying, we're saying about Jesus now, and what y'all used to believe about the sons of Jupiter?
Yeah,
you're just telling you the same thing you already believe, but a different God now.
Yeah, it's like that Simpsons thing where Reverend Lovejoy says, "Have you tried another religion? They're all basically the same. They're all pretty much the same."
I am very excited that you are going to be at BajaCon.
Yes.
You were a speaker at BajaCon last year, and it was good to see you on stage. You did a wonderful presentation. The PowerPoint. Now, I envied you. I thought, I should have, because you were brought in kind of last minute. There was another person, and you were replacing that other person. And when I realized that David FItzgerald was going to be on there, I'm like, I should up my game.
Too kind. But I was really jazzed by it. Yeah.
I've been working on a similar project talking about because I am kind of fascinated with how these religions come about, and in particular all of the little weirdness of Genesis. Where did this book come from? Where did this idea come from? Because those people didn't exist. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
All those elements of that story come from a half a dozen other elements that we know to be at least, well, I guess it would be fair, thousands of years older than Genesis.
It gets worse than that, because not only is that the case, but Genesis and in fact, the whole first 5 books of the Bible come from other guys in the 2nd or 3rd century BC, summarizing these things that were thousands of years older than Judaism. And so we can, like, for instance, Moses. I think next this year at BahaCon, I might just talk about the story of Moses, because we can pinpoint where the Moses story first appears, and it's about 1,000 years after what most Christians think, or Jews for that matter think.
Yeah,
Because they
no,
can't
I
really.
was always under the suspicion, where that wasn't always, but I mean, there was a time when I started adopting the position that, it sounds like a lot of this is post-exilic, and it's almost like it is if they were talking about Babylon and just kind of changed the name.
Right. Yeah.
Because that if you do that, then a lot of shit makes sense.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense otherwise.
And when you read Mario Liverani and Russell Gamerkin and some other scholars out there, they keep pushing it back. It's like, oh no, this was not written in Mosaic times. This was not written in the dual monarchy times. This was not written post-Alexander. This was written in the Hellenistic times after Alexander the Great. And we can even pinpoint the year within 2 years of when the first 5 books of Moses were written. And it blows my mind. Blows my mind.
Do tell me that one, because I mean, I got that it was roughly 450 or more, or slightly more recent, somewhere in the mid 5th century BCE, and it was post-exilic, and it was all, I can't remember the names, the names of the particular people that were identified as being involved in that, but
yeah,
I'm sure you know.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. About 2.5 years ago, I stopped working on my book on sex and violence in the Bible, because I was so excited about what people like Russell Gamerkin were saying about where the Old Testament came from. And just not even 2 years ago, 18 months ago or so, Jonathan Adler, this Tel Aviv archaeologist, his work, completely independent of Gamerkin, completely dovetails with him. He's saying, yeah, we have no evidence for Judaism before the 2nd century BC. It just doesn't seem
for rabbinic Judaism. My professor that I just mentioned a moment ago, I should bring up his name, Mark Hanshaw. He was like, he's one of my favorite teachers that I've ever had for anything. His enthusiasm in teaching that class was wonderful. It's so sad that it was met with such apathy by the rest of the class, who were just upset that their preconceptions were not being reinforced.
And it's like, what did they think the comparative religion is like? Comparative religion, of how our religion is so much better than their religion, is what I think they were signed up for.
It's as if they walked into the class thinking that they just lost the comparative part, the history of religion. So they think they're going to get a nonstop sermon for 15 weeks.
Or why Christianity is better, 101, Yeah.
Yeah, better than what? Because there's belief in Jesus, and then, I don't know.
Yeah.
You worship the devil.
Those are your 2 choices. Yep. The other also rans. Yeah.
I was looking for one. I need to put a link for your book that you prefer. So make sure to drop that with me before this goes public.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so I am very interested in the peripheral influences, not just for the other religions that were around at the time, but obviously the ancestral traditions that contributed to all of this. I mean, it's funny when you read anything out of Ashurbanipal's library, for example, and you start happen across, like with the Numa Elish, there's lines that call to memory that, let us make man in our image. And
it's like, where have I heard that before? That sounds vaguely familiar.
Or in reading the legend of Enki trespassing in the garden of, I think it's Inanna, and then there's Ninhursag, who was standing guard there, right? And then she curses Enki, and he falls because he's eaten the forbidden fruit, not just one fruit, not a particular fruit from a particular tree, all of the fruit in all of the trees, and all the bushes, and they're all forbidden, and he ate them all, and all of them cursed him, and he's a god, and yet he falls. So we have the fallen immortal, and then Ninhursag, so that was a bit harsh. Something God can't do. Right?
That's all.
Ninner Sock says, that was I went overboard. So let me fix this. So she bears 7 daughters to cure each of his wounds. And so she bears a daughter for each of the wounds that he has. And one of them, curiously, Ninti, daughter of the rib, for she was born to close the wound to his side. I'm like, that sounds really familiar.
Yeah. And then you get Utnapishtim and his boat, and releasing the raven and the dove. Yeah, it's
That was another one, because I've had historians call me out on that in saying so positively that we know that this flood was based on the flood of Shuruppak around 2900 BCE. So you're basing this on one guy's work. I'm like, well, at that time, that might have been true. That I'm going on one guy's opinion, but when you read, there's like a half a dozen different books. It's not just the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh. I know that you know this, but the Epic of Gilgamesh was itself based on earlier works, a collection of earlier works, all of which mention Uber-Tutu, or they mention Ziusudra himself by name, or they mention Shuruppak. All of them. So we know what flood they're all talking about. Right. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
So for anybody that's not following along, around 2900 BCE, archaeologists and geologists have confirmed that there was a substantial flood centered on the city of Shuruppak in the floodplain of Iraq. The water's depth was calculated to have risen to about 22 feet. Now, this is a floodplain, so 22 feet would have obscured practically everything you can see, right? It's just even the hills. And 22 feet also equates to something else. Measured in cubits, it works out to be 15 cubits. Now, where have we heard a flood depth of 15 cubits?
It's like Snickers. Everywhere you cut it, it's nuts. It's like, and it's so obvious in hindsight. It feels so obvious in hindsight. Of course, this stuff was. I don't know if you've read Francesca Sarvakopoulou's and God Anatomy. I'm sure you must have. But same thing. It's like their depiction of Yahweh and everything we know about ancient Judea, ancient Israel. It's just so the opposite of what we were all taught in Sunday school.
I can almost hear the typing of the critics complaining about us mocking their deeply held beliefs.
Yeah.
Well, kind of the same thing, Freudian slip. However, since I wanted to honor Daniel Dennett today, I think I have to harken back to him again, because he said there's no polite way to tell someone that they've been lied to their whole life. I'm paraphrasing what he said. But I mean, that's the sentence. There's no way.
There's no
how would you do that?
Yeah,
it's like
there's no
that scene. Well, and it's like that scene in A Beautiful Mind. Remember when the guy's wife comes in and she's trying to when he's in a mental hospital and he still thinks that he's working for the government against the Russians or whatever. She has to tell him that the whole thing is an illusion. I love that scene, because how do you upend the last decade of this guy's life, all of the reality that he thinks is real, and tell him that none of that shit happened? That's hard to do.
It is. And as you say, it's like when I used to do talks, we'd have Christian apologist students come up to the Bay Area and meet with all different people, including atheists. And I'd always start my talk saying, unfortunately, one of us is wrong. Either I'm wrong and you're right, and I'm wrong, but we can't both be right. And let's just start from there and go. And because what else can you do? What else can you do? And it's ironic that we're trying to protect the feelings of people who have no qualms whatsoever about ragging on every single other religion except theirs.
Oh, yeah. Kill me in a moment if they think God commanded it. Did you know the Satanic Temple got a pipe bomb thrown at him like yesterday?
I did not know. Know that.
God talked to some asshole in Oklahoma, sent him to Salem, Massachusetts to throw a pipe bomb that does no appreciable damage. But because
it's a satanic miracle.
Because he built the bomb and it included a bit of his hair
Oh
somehow
no!
in the parts of the mechanism that they found. There's like his
Yeah.
hair is stuck in it.
So the
So
DNA evidence
yeah,
is
like I don't know. I'm speculating now because I don't know how you detect this, but they found hair embedded in the device itself. So it's whoever built the bomb had to like bolt this to this, and it's got their
and
hair
it's
in
got
it
one of those
somehow.
hairs.
DNA isolated. They go to fucking Oklahoma, arrest this guy.
Boom. Not today, Jesus. Love it. Gotta love it.
So what's your excuse going to be? I didn't build the bomb. I was just there and looking over it while the guy.
God made me do it. He told me.
Yeah. It's just it's funny that you, like you say, there are people that Christians have told me all about Christian love for the longest time. I
Yeah.
love you, man. I'm just worried about your soul. And then they also tell me that they will be perfectly happy to spend eternity looking down on me and their own parents and siblings and best friends, laughing at their eternal torture while they are in heaven, being superior. And they tell me that they'll be okay with this,
but I totally
because
get what you're saying.
yeah, they tell me that they'll be okay with this because they'll be deprived of their free will at that point. Not understanding what a horrible monster that makes both them and God. It just occurs to me that most times believers, even people who dedicate their life to it, even the William Lane Craigs of the world, clearly have not given this enough thought. They've never thought about anything else, but they didn't think about enough.
This is the thing. This is the thing. And here's another thing. If God can do that for you, miserable sinner who's imperfect but forgiven, why can't he do that for everybody? I mean, if he's gonna hold his nose to let you in, he can hold his nose to let us in too. They don't
Yeah,
think.
why
They
would you
just don't
want
think
to
it through.
be why would you want
Yeah,
to be in an eternity where you
yeah,
have no free will?
yeah,
Wouldn't it be easier
yeah.
to just admit that, hey, logically you can't have free will now? I mean,
I don't know.
if Pharaoh's heart can be hardened
Yes.
just because God wants to unnecessarily prolong suffering,
Yeah.
what are you thinking, man?
This is why once you are a Christian who stopped becoming Christian, it feels so obvious in hindsight. Have you ever seen the show The Good Place? That Kristen Bell show?
No, I haven't seen that one.
If you haven't, you need to see it because the thing I love about it the most, for one thing, the last episode of it is like one of the greatest things in all of television history I've ever seen, full stop. But the whole idea of the show basically says, okay, let's say Christianity was true, or well, it doesn't even say that. Let's say there is an afterlife and a happy, heaven, and it just shows how that all goes to hell. No pun intended. Um, uh, from its own, from the fault of its own, the weight of its own discontinuities. It's amazing. It's hilarious. The show is hilarious, but it really really makes you think. And yeah,
So then tell me, and I don't want you to tell me too much about this. And we're only going to do like, another few minutes of this interview because I don't want you
gotcha.
to divulge too much, but I do want you to whet the appetite. I want you to get people to, it's like those clickbait things when they say, and this, they befriended a wild tiger and then this happened. And you go, oh my gosh, what happened? And now you have to click the thing.
Exactly.
So give me another
So
5 or 6 minutes.
the sizzle reel
I'm sorry, what?
of the new book. Give you the sizzle reel for the new book.
Sizzle reel.
In
Yes,
essence,
yes.
you got it. So it's kind of in 3 parts. I thought it was originally going to be part 1 is going to be talking about the evolutionary stages that world religions go through. Part 2 talks about the surprising origins of monotheism. I call it the gods of monotheism. And part 3 was going to be about, and let's look at the backstory of all the top 10 world religious founder figures to see if, like Jesus, maybe some of them have a dodgy backstory that makes us wonder. Well, here's the way the books come out. There's 3 books. Book one is book 1 and 2 originally, all that business about monotheism and about the evolutionary stages. Books 2 and 3 are about Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Confucius, all of them down the line, and making the
Do
argument.
you include Mormonism or
I
Baha'i
do.
in that?
I did tip the hat to Mormonism at the end, even though it's a spinoff of Christianity, really. But
Yeah. And
uh,
Baha'i is a spin-off of
Baha'i
Islam.
also gets a tip of the hat. So does Scientology. So does Rastafarianism. Um, I also mentioned that Satanism is arguably a spinoff from Christianity. um,
That is funny and true.
yeah, yeah. It makes you think, but yeah, that's the thing that really blows my mind.
And
Is
strangely, Satanism is a spin-off of atheism, as if that
yeah,
makes any sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It just yeah. It's ironic that Christians don't believe in evolution because their whole religion is evolutionary action. It's an evolutionary jungle in action.
One thing that might go against the clickbait thing that I was shooting for is
Yeah,
the gods plural of monotheism,
yeah,
because I'm just thinking of a handful, and I'm not going to go into detail right now, but I mean, people up very often one of the misconceptions that I hear is, people used to believe in a bunch of different gods, but then they came back to
yeah,
the original truth, right?
yes, yes,
Of
yes, 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 yes,
believing in
yes.
just one God, of the
Yeah.
one God.
Oh,
And they don't realize that the God they believe in was not the first one true God that people believed in. There was a whole bunch of them.
oh, there you go. Yep, 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 yep.
And that
Um,
Judaism itself was a polytheistic religion once upon a
for
time.
sure. And even as late as the 5th century BCE, which is not that long ago in the scheme of things. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um,
All right. Unless you had something else to say, I was going to let you just wrap it up.
yeah, I was going to say all this and more I talk about in the book, and just for the Old Testament and just for the origins of Islam alone, I think atheists out there are going to love this book. But it talks about all those things and so much more, and I'm really jazzed about this book. Uh, yeah,
Perfect place to close it off. Thank you. Always a pleasure, sir. Looking forward to Baja Khan.
right, right back at you. Can't wait. All right.